welcome to my channel. I'm Jason White, and this is my channel, Jason's Weird Reads. Thank you for hitting the play button. And if you don't know, if you just stumbled upon here and have no idea what I do, I like to talk about books on this channel. I talk about horror books mostly, but I also talk about fantasy and science fiction. So this is my video as to why I decided to keep reading the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and why I'm gonna keep reading it despite all the controversy. And I'm gonna talk at the end of the video more about my feelings about the controversy. I didn't want to, but I found myself it just poured out of me, and I think I'm gonna publish it because it's not really adding to the conversation that's going on, or the argument, but it is explaining as to why I want to continue reading. So stay tuned until the end and you will see why. So I just wanted to briefly go over, like, this is sort of like the Wheel of Time with me. It took me a long time to read the entirety of the Wheel of Time. I started reading those books when only book 4 or 5 was out, and I stopped reading it. I don't know why I stopped reading it, honestly. I probably had an excuse or a reason why I stopped reading it, but I can't remember what it is. It was like in the 90s when I stopped reading it. And then I tried to get back into it in the around 2008 or so. This is Wheel of Time still I'm talking about. I read the first 2 or 3 books and then I stopped again. I didn't finish the series. I started again in 2018, I think it was. And I finally read all 14 or 15 books, and that felt good. It's good to finally get that one off the TBR mountain that it's become, and it was rewarding in many other facets too. The one thing I like about reading long, complicated series like that is you tend to find yourself in a little bit of a love-hate relationship with it, and I think that's the most truest form of love there can be, because if you can still continue with it despite your misgivings or the things that bother you, then that, I think, is where the true love lies. So Malazan is kind of similar in that I wanted to read it. I've added it to my Goodreads list way back in 2008, and I didn't read it until 2011. This is Gardens of the Moon, of course. And I read it, and I remember not really enjoying Gardens very much because it was a very different way of telling a story. And the basic idea is that there's no serious main character, and there's not even a group of main characters. You're kind of bouncing around between characters, and there doesn't seem to be an end goal. Like, the Gardens of the Moon itself doesn't even feel like a setup book for a series, not really. And so it was kind of jarring. It's very complicated. You know you're getting into something seriously complicated when you read Gardens of the Moon. And then I went on to read Dead House Gates, and I loved it. And I was like, wow, I gotta continue reading this series. And that was way back in 2011. And then I just didn't. I didn't continue the series with Memories of Ice. I bought 2 versions of Memories of Ice because, well, I don't really like, just as a side note here, I don't really like these covers. I don't know why we have decided to go with covers like this instead of these awesome, fantastic art pieces. Like, why can't we just stick with the art? Why do we have to go with this boring crap? So I bought 2 versions of Memories of Ice, and I didn't read it. I think the reason for that was because Memories of Ice itself is like over 1,000 pages. Yeah, it's like almost 1,200 pages, and that's quite intimidating. And I have to be really dedicated in order to just dive in to books that are that big. And one thing that I found made me decide to dive in to hyper focus on a series is when I started my booktube channel. Suddenly there's like a really good reason to continue and to struggle through. Whatever you think of that, I don't care, but here I am, and I'm reading. So, I didn't continue on with the series back in 2011, but since I finished reading, actually, when I announced that I was going to read the entire series of Wheel of Time, I had a whole bunch of people say, you know what, next you should read the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I got that so much. There's so many people saying, read Malazan, you're going to love it. And at first I was like, no, no. I'm not jumping from one series of books that is 1,200 pages to another series of books that is 1,200 pages. I'm not crazy. I am not that crazy. But apparently I am, because it started to niggle at me soon after I finished. I was like, well, maybe I could give that series another try too, because, you know, I want to finish reading it, and I enjoyed my journey so far. So why not, right? But I just put it, I was going to start when Elliot Brooks did a read along. I think it was 2019. And I was going to join in on that. But I just didn't. I don't know why I dropped the ball on that one, but I did. I'm glad I did, actually, because that one didn't go too far. I don't think Elliot Brooks finished the series. She didn't like it very much, which is fine. Let me say right now that this series is not for everyone. Like I said, it's complicated. It's like that complicated relationship that sometimes you think you might be better off without. Unless, of course, you're into that kind of complicated relationship. Am I making sense? Probably not. Anyway, so it was bugging me, and I almost joined the Elliot Brooks read along, and I didn't. But then soon after, Mike's book reviews, he mentioned. I want to thank Mike. Thank you, Mike, for shouting out my channel. That was awesome and completely unexpected on my part. Anyways, he early last year, it's like a year ago, and this is April, I think it was more than a year ago, he said, okay, in 2021 we're going to read Malazan Book of the Fallen. I'm like, that's like 8 months away, man. Are you crazy? So at first I was like, I'm not going to do that. I've been very moody in regards to this series. But as we got closer to the date of the read along, the more it appealed to me, because I just felt like I need to tackle this series. And I wasn't sure why. So I started watching booktube videos. More importantly, MalazTube videos. And there's a lot of really great content out there on the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And if you don't know about MalazTube, let me tell you, a year ago there was nothing. I tried looking up some reviews and whatnot on Malazan Book of the Fallen, and there was hardly anything at all. It was ridiculous. But then I think Iskar Jarek is one of the first guys to come along. He started making Malazan Book of the Fallen videos regularly, and now there's a plethora, and it's awesome. So I knew that there was a good chance that if I got stuck, I would have at least a resource to help me along. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do the Mike's book reviews, read along on this. I joined the Discord, and I started reading, and I found something interesting happened. This time around, well, I reread Gardens of the Moon. I found that I enjoyed Gardens of the Moon so much more than the first time. I loved it, and I struggled. I struggled so hard with Dead House Gates. I don't know why, but I almost put it down and said, screw this, I'm out. There's part of me that still wishes I had, because it's very daunting. Look at how thick these books are. This isn't all of them. There's still one that's missing. But all of them are like 1,000 pages, except for the first two. So anyways, I finished it. I think, actually, my mistake, and I think I told Mike, actually, this on one of his videos regarding Dead House Gates. That the reason why I struggled with Dead House Gates was because I went and I listened to it on audiobook. Now, that's not to insult the audiobook production at all. I love Ralph Pfister. He's a fantastic narrator. But this book is like, so much happens that you're going to miss stuff. And I sometimes have trouble paying attention. Sometimes you're listening to an audiobook when other things are happening, and you stop paying attention, and when that happens, you're going to lose stuff. And that sort of trains your brain as you're going to stop paying attention to this book, because it's obviously not important if all these other things are happening. And so I missed a lot of Dead House Gates on the second read a lot, especially in the middle, where it got kind of boring and yet still there was a lot of stuff happening. I really enjoyed the beginning and the end the most of Dead House Gates. The ending is just like heartbreaking. But so at the end of Dead House Gates, I took a break, and now that I've picked up Memories of Ice, I have found something weird has happened. Now you're gonna find a lot of Malaztube people and Malazan fans all over say that that book 3 is the decisive book where you're gonna decide you want to continue reading or not. And so far, I'm about 200 pages in, and so far they're right. I've heard one person describe it as like your brain decides that it's time to start understanding the way Erikson writes. And so far, this book is so much easier to understand. I don't know. There's got to be something that Erikson did. Maybe this is just where he started to mature more as a writer, and he was letting the reader in on more things and helping the reader along just a bit more. And it makes a huge difference, whatever it is, because I'm really enjoying it. And also, the weird thing, and I say this is weird because of my first reading of Gardens of the Moon, I didn't like it that much, but my second reading, I loved it. And now, going to Memories of Ice, you go back to the people, I want to say the world, but it's not, it's the continent where Gardens of the Moon took place, and you're with those people again, and it just feels awesome being back there, and that's the best I can explain. So, during my journey with watching Malaztube and all the people who do fantastic content there, I learned quite a few things, and this is obviously within the last year or so. I learned quite a bit about the world itself, and this is why I wanted to read it. The biggest thing that really caught my attention was the themes of compassion. And at first, that when people started talking about there's a huge theme of compassion within these books, I was like, what? I mean, these books they're violent and they're nasty. People are really hard to like in these books, but they're always interesting, like the characters. But then I started to understand in that you have characters doing horrible things in these books, but then you see an entirely different side of them. I don't think it's been explored in too much detail within the first 3 books. I hear that the last 3 books get really philosophical, so I don't know. But I really want to explore this idea of compassion towards other people. I think, actually, I was watching the TV show, the Netflix show, The Crown, and I think it's season 2, episode 8, somewhere around there, where they do the JFK episode. That episode makes me think of what people talk about when they talk about a theme of compassion, because in that episode there's a very, very strong theme of compassion and seeing things from the other person's point of view, and how important that is, and how we often just ignore that, or we're ignorant of it and we don't care about it, and that leads to a hell of a lot of conflict, and conflict that could be avoided if we were able to critically think a little bit better. And all this stuff goes into why I decided to continue reading the series, but I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So, but there's also Iskar Jarek keeps mentioning how there's gay characters in within the Malazan Book of the Fallen World, and there's also many different races of creatures, intelligent creatures, within the books, and and the incredible thing about that is there is absolutely no attention drawn to this. So you have a gay couple, and if you weren't paying attention, you might not even notice that they're a gay couple. And that's how much little attention is drawn into this. And I like this because that's helping the process of normalizing this whole thing, which is what everyone, well, 90% of people on BookTube want. And so that's all here. And it's just normal in Malazan Book of the Fallen to be gay and in a close, intimate relationship. Nobody in that world gives a shit about that. and that's awesome. There's no controversy. No controversy whatsoever on that. And there's also no controversy of having mixed races in one city. So you have like a city full of different. You have humans. You have a whole bunch of different like Belgast. You might have a Tistandi come along, although that might cause some like whoa because they're ancient, but nobody cares. It's nobody's gonna physically come at you for being different, and that's one of the positive pluses of living within the Malazan world. And I would not want to live in the Malazan world because of everything else. It would be a terrible place to live, I think, unless of course you were huge and really enjoyed fighting, maybe then, and you weren't poor. I guess it's not much different from our own world now, is it? In that respect. All right. So another reason why I wanted to read these books is the challenge, because you're going to hear a lot of people talk about how challenging this series is, and it certainly is. Like, as the saying goes, become a cliche to say it, but it's true. Erikson will not hold your hand. He does not give any information that will help you. You kind of have to come to your own, and that's part of the fun, though, I found, because I see a lot of readers trying to puzzle out and what's going on, but also trying to figure out what might happen in the future within the storyline. That intrigues me. I like the idea of trying to figure out these books, and I want to be. And there's another thing I've experienced is that I think because Erikson does this, when something does happen that answers a whole bunch of questions from the past, you're like, what? When in other books you might not have had a similar, oh my god moment. And that rush of adrenaline you feel is incredible. And I want more of that. So those are the reasons pretty much why I wanted to read these books in the first place. Now, we're going to get into maybe a little bit of the controversy. And I just want to say up front that I don't mean any disrespect towards anyone, either for or against. I think if you want to read the Malazan Book of the Fallen, great. But if you don't want to read them, that's fine too. Before all this controversy, there's plenty of people who jumped on board into that controversy saying, I'm not going to read these books for sure. They weren't going to read them anyway. Let's be clear, alright? You may have seen on my community tab here on BookTube that I recently did a poll asking you whether or not you wanted me to stick to just doing horror on this channel, or if you guys minded basically if I branched off into fantasy like I am with this video. And overwhelmingly at 90%, with over 100 votes, people said just stick to, keep the content, all your reading content, fantasy and all that, on Jason's Weird Reads. And thanks to everyone who voted. They're still open if you still want to vote, but I don't think it's going to change. At least I hope not. But there's a reason why there's a couple reasons why I put that up there, and the main reason being that whenever I do fantasy videos, those videos tend to tank compared to my horror videos. My horror videos get quite a bit of views and watch time, but like I said, the fantasy videos just don't. But I want to get into talking about the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and here comes the controversy. Within the last couple of weeks, Steven Erikson, the author, has come under a bit of an assault by booktubers mostly, and everyone probably knows what this is all about. If you don't, I think I'll link a couple of the videos down there where you can investigate further. I'm not going to get too far into any of that, other than to say that I am with the bridge burners. I'm with MalazTube, mostly because I think, honestly, at the end of the day, the attacks that Steven Erikson came under were relatively small, and this really shouldn't have happened at all. Because if you want to take the first idea that Steven Erikson he broke the silent agreement, and it's a silent agreement. There's nowhere anywhere where it's a law, or it's just a silent agreement of breaching reviewer space. Reviewer space is something that's currently a controversy right now anyway. Really what that comes down to is when an author moans on their social media platform about a bad review, then their legions of fans will go and hoard and attack that reviewer, and that is wrong. That should never happen. I think fans, you should be able to not be. I guess that's just who we are as human beings. We have herd mentality, and the more we gather together, the more stupid we become. But it's that type of thing that happens that has completely ruined author and reviewer interaction, especially in modern times. So I decided that I'm going to keep reading the Malazan Book of the Fallen because, as I said, I really don't see any issue with, because Steven Erikson, whenever he did interact with his fans, it was always kind. He was never attacking, and he never sent his legion of fans to go attack. I think any time an author suggests in their own platform that or decides to do what Erikson did and do like an essay type thing, I think that that you should at least put a disclaimer. Do not, I think the fans will listen if you're like, listen, don't go attacking anyone. This is just my opinion. Because otherwise you're going to get the legion of frothing at the mouth people who may be upset for a good reason or may not be, but they're going to go and attack that person online. And as a person who's been through that, or has at least seen close friends go through that, it's not nice. It feels awful. You can't just turn off the computer and move on. It goes. Some people have some anxiety issues, some issues with depression, and they can't handle that. So let's be a little bit more grown up in regards to that, right? So, this is, and I just want to add on to this that Erikson never did any of that. He was always very respectful in regards to interacting with his fans and reviewers. If you want a good example of that, take the podcast 10 Very Big Books podcast, because in that podcast there's there's three readers reading the books. Two of them are reading for the first time, and there's one who's already read the series. And one of the people who are reading it for the first time can't stand the series, but she's reading it for the podcast. And the other guy, he likes the series, but he has a lot of criticisms, and they're not exactly the most friendly when they come to criticizing the series. And Steven Erikson goes on the show regularly, as far as I know, and they talk with him, and he's fine with that. He's intellectual enough to separate his feelings from his work being insulted. He doesn't get angry. If he does, he keeps it in very well. He's very, very respectful. I think as a writer, you do grow thick skin, especially when you're in the scope that the Malazan books are. They're best-selling books, and it's kind of funny how that's, it's a small community of Malazan fans, but it's international best-selling, and it's published quite regularly. Like the 10 books are done, but the Bantam or the Tor books, they published the entire series. They never dropped it. Had it not sold at all, we wouldn't have these books. Like I said, I wasn't going to go into the whole. I wasn't going to try. I wanted to skim around the controversy but I think I'm not a big booktuber, but not too many of the bigger, like over 1,000 subscribers booktubers have really come, at least not that I've seen, have come to the defense of Malazan Book of the Fallen. I think it's got to be said that Erikson didn't do anything terrible. Like he didn't get found out as a pedophile. He's not a serial killer. And if he was, I wouldn't be able to finish the books. It would just bother me too much if he was a pedophile or something like that. All he did was comment on some reviews And like I said, though, they were respectful. I think if we're going to draw a line, we should draw it there. Be respectful all the time in your interactions with reviewers. And do not send your horde of rabid fans. And if you're aware that that has happened, put a stop to it. Seriously. But I guess the idea here is to stop it before that even can happen. But you know what? There's a lot of people within the Malazan Book of the Fallen community who really appreciated and dug their interactions with the author of this series. There's a lot of people who say, and this was before, I learned of this long before this controversy ever happened, that there's at least two people I could tell you about. They have their own booktube channel, MalazTube channels where they've discussed this. That and they say that the Malazan Book of the Fallen, the series, saved their lives because they were about to take their own lives. To me, it's just incredible that a series of books can make a person decide to stay a little bit longer, and that really shows to the power of these books. And I don't think that should be ignored. And if these people who were before reading the Malazan Book of the Fallen were ready to take their own lives and then didn't, and maybe they found a reason to live in the interim while they were reading the series, and they weren't put off by any of the commentary that Erikson put on their videos, and were elated by Erikson sharing their videos on his Facebook page, that to me shows that Erikson is probably much more of an incredibly kind person than the demon he's been made out to be recently. Alright, so if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry for my ramble. So, like I said, if you want to read Malazan Book of the Fallen, man, just do it. You're in for quite the intellectual ride. And if you don't want to read it, great. That's awesome. Go read something that you want to read, honestly. So thank you for watching. Keep being safe, keep being creative, and I'll catch you guys in the next bookish video.